Hockey is back. The Sabres on the ice for training camp. We will preview the Sabres training camp and preseason as we inch closer to hockey season. We've got new numbers. We've got a contract extension. We've got 3 things to watch for in Sabres camp, and we will keep rolling on our Sabres money and power list. The next 3 on our list coming up here on the Locked On Sabres podcast.
You're Locked On Sabres, your daily podcast on the Buffalo Sabres. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Sabres your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast. Joe DiBiase joining you today on a Thursday, and it is great to be back because the Sabres are on the ice for training camp. We have hockey to talk about as the preseason is only 48 hours away. Scratch that, 72 hours away. Just did the math wrong. In my head, the Sabres will be on the ice for their preseason opener against the Philadelphia Flyers on Sunday at 2 o'clock. Yes, that is during the Bills game. No, I do not expect many of you Bills and Sabre fans to watch that game, but might be something to store on the DVR, watch a little bit later. I don't even think it's on TV, so actually you'd have to watch it on the online a little bit later on. I know that's what I'll be doing, but I'll be very plugged into this preseason as there are a couple of very interesting things to look forward to in Sabres camp and the preseason. Today on the show, 3 things to watch for at Sabres training camp, the next 3 names on our Sabres money and power list, and some news from both Sabres GM Kevyn Adams, as well as a couple other things about the team, including new jersey numbers that we have to look forward to. At Sneaky Joe Sports to follow me on social media, on the Twitters, and at Locked On Sabres to follow us on Twitter as a podcast account. So, the news of the day in the last 24 to 48 hours is that Kevyn Adams, Sabres general manager, has a contract extension. This doesn't really change anything for me because I'm not going to lie, I didn't even know he was entering the final year of his deal. In fact, we don't actually technically know if he was going into the final year of his contract. But nonetheless, he gets an extension. I am guessing that is what happened, by the way, that he was just going into a lame duck year. They didn't want to worry about it, get it out of the way, give him the extension, multi-year, 3 years, 4 years, whatever it ended up being, and just kind of eliminate a potential distraction, especially when, if for some reason the Sabres wanted to fire Kevyn Adams after the 2022-23 season, no contract extension is going to prohibit them from doing so. In fact, Jason Botterill and Tim Murray had recently signed contract extensions with the Sabres before they were fired by Terry and Kim Pegula. So, an extension for Adams, I don't think it's an indictment on the success he's had. I mean, it might be in a way, but we don't know yet if this is going to work. There's a lot of young talent the Sabres have built up, draft picks, prospects, young guys on the NHL roster, but it's yet to come to fruition on the ice in terms of success. They have yet to prove they're a better team than they were under Jason Botterill, under Tim Murray, at the end of Darcy Regier. And until that happens, I am not going to declare any GM safe or solidified in his position. I don't think it would come to fruition where the Sabres would fire Kevyn Adams after this season unless they take a massive step back and find themselves in the 60 to 70 point range. But I think there could be a GM on a hot seat after this year if they don't progress, if they stay stagnant, if they plateau and they have 75 points. And again, they are not playing meaningful games into February, let alone March and April. If they are 25 points out of a playoff spot at the end of the year, like they were this past season, then I don't think they fire Adams, but I think the pressure will get turned up to 11 on him if that happens. And what will be a success? Maybe a season in the 80s, but we'll talk more about that as we preview the regular season. Today, more about camp and the preseason. So, new jersey numbers to tell you about as Sabres players are on the ice reporting to camp. A number change for Sabres forward Anders Bjork. He goes from number 96 to number 15, formerly worn by Mr. Jack Eichel. in between, a Mr. Riley Sheehan. Riley Sheehan, by the way, remember, he's back after a year in Seattle. He's back wearing the number 8 because Bjork is wearing number 15. Also, returning after a multi-year hiatus in the KHL, Lawrence Pilot is switching from number 24, which now is owned by Dylan Cozens, to the number 20. So Lawrence Pilot will be skating around wearing number 20. New Sabres goaltender Eric Comrie will be wearing number 31. And New Sabres defenseman Ilya Lyubushkin, who I am not going to lie, I forgot existed until yesterday, one of the big acquisitions by the Sabres this offseason, he will be wearing number 46. So some new numbers for some new Sabres. Nick Clegg, by the way, maybe if you are wondering about him, I don't think he's going to be on the NHL team. If he does make the Sabres, somehow he'll be wearing number 38, but I don't think he will end up making it. When we return, 3 things to watch for at Sabres camp and into the preseason. And also, the next 3 names on our Sabres money and power list, the 30 most important individuals in the success of the Buffalo Sabres. That is coming up here on the Locked On Sabres podcast with Joe DiBiase. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your football betting information this season. Find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis on every game you can find. You can find prop bets there. I'm constantly tracking award winners in the NFL. Josh Allen being the MVP frontrunner, comeback player of the year odds. I believe last I checked, Saquon Barkley was the favorite. Division odds. Why aren't the Jaguars the favorite to win the AFC South? They're the only team that's really impressed through 2 weeks. You can find out at betonline.net who the favorite is and why the favorite is who they are. The fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including Major League Baseball, MMA, boxing, golf, and yes, hockey. Over-unders are set for every team in the league, including the Sabres. We will preview more of that on a full betting preview of the season coming up in the next couple of shows. But the Sabres are at 77.5 at BetOnline. BetOnline.net, the easiest way to find all your sports betting information. Use your mobile device to learn more or head over to BetOnline.net. BetOnline, where the game starts. Joe DiBiase here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. The Sabres on Thursday hit the ice for their first practice of training camp. It really sneaks up on you. If you're a big football fan, there's a long build-up to football, right? There's OTAs, there's mini camp, the draft and free agency has skipped over that. Then you've got a month-long training camp. Then you've got 3 preseason games. It's months and months and months of build-up to football. Hockey, it's just boom, camp, boom, preseason, boom, season. All like that in the matter of weeks. And the Sabres will play their first preseason game only 3 days after taking to the ice at training camp. I believe they're practicing at Harbor Center. I'll double check on that. Actually, they have been practicing at the arena. So 3 things to watch for in training camp. Number 1, who will be named captain? Kevin Adams confirming to the media on Thursday afternoon that the Sabres will indeed have a captain. I believe Don Granato had spoke about that earlier in the offseason, so we assumed this was happening. We thought this was going to happen. Adams confirming that it's going to happen today. Now, I don't know timeline on that. We might get it at the opener. We might get it tomorrow. We could get it in the preseason, but they will have a captain, and I believe very strongly that Kyle Okposo is going to be named the captain. If I were setting betting lines on who's going to be the Sabres captain, I would go minus 500 for it being Kyle Okposo. I think he will be the captain. He is called Dad by his teammates. The guy named Dad is going to be the captain, and he's been the de facto captain, maybe even back into when Jack Eichel was wearing the C. 1 year left on his deal. The only thing I wonder is, would they not give Okposo the captaincy because they foresee an Alex Tuch getting the captaincy? And if they want to give Okposo another contract after this year, which is the final year of his deal, would they not want to give it to him because they don't want to strip him of it and give it to Alex Tuch? That's the only thing I wonder. If they think Tuch is the captain next year, would they just give it to him now because they don't want to strip Okposo if he's still going to remain on the team? And I think he might be earning his way into a second contract with the Buffalo Sabres. So that's the only thing I wonder a little bit about Okposo, but I still do ultimately believe he will get the C. But if I were creating odds, I'd have Okposo minus 500. I think I'd have Alex Tuch second. It would be a distant second, maybe a plus 400, a plus 500, 600. But I do believe he would be second, and I don't think anybody else is in consideration. Dylan Cozens, too young. Rasmus Dahlin, way too young, and I don't think he'll ever be captain anyway. I think it's going to be Okposo with a small chance of it being Alex Tuch and a very rare outcome of it being the field, anybody else on this team. So who will be the captain is the number one thing to watch for at Sabres training camp. The second thing to watch for at training camp, will Jack Quinn and JJ Paterka indeed make the roster? I do believe at least one will make the roster, and I do think it will be Jack Quinn if I were betting, but could it be two? There might have to be a healthy scratch for a guy like Vinny Hino-Stroza. There might have to be an injury along the way. Maybe they waive somebody. There is an uphill battle for both guys to make the team. I think it's likely one will, uphill battle for both. I think Quinn is more likely than Paterka, but remember, out of camp last year, it was being said Paterka earned a spot in practice and in the preseason, but the Sabres didn't put him on the team because they knew he wouldn't be there all year anyway. They just stuck him in Rochester. If he, for a second year in a row, wins a job out of camp and you don't give him a spot, what does that say to the kid? Because any thought of, oh, you got to show up and earn it, light it on fire. Because you will be saying to that kid, hey, kid, you've earned it twice and we're still not giving it to you. And that is not how you should be operating an organization. So I'll be monitoring that very closely with Peterka. He is the most interesting individual to me in all of training camp. But that, again, is with me having the notion that Quinn will be on the roster. So Quinn and Peterka making the team. Number 2, and 3 things to watch for at Sabres training camp. And number 3, who will play center? There are a lot of centermen, a lot of guys that have played center on this team, including Tage Thompson. That's 1. Dylan Cozens. 2. Peyton Krebs. 3. Casey Middlestat. 4. Zemgus Girgensons. 5. Rasmus Asplund. 6. Who is going to play center? 2 of those players will be on the wing. I think it's more likely than not that Asplund or Girgensons, probably Asplund, will end up playing on the wing. And I think Middlestat is probably going to end up playing on the wing as well. He has spoken about his comfortability playing on the wing, so he's fine moving to that side. And I think they want to keep Cozens at center, even though he played wing at the World Championships. I think they want to keep looking at Krebs at center and not give up on that just yet. And obviously, I think Tage Thompson will remain a center for the length of his Sabres career. So, Asplund, Girgensons. They also fit more in a checking role. You can't go Cozens, Thompson, Krebs, Middlestat, 4 skilled lines. What's your shutdown line? I think they probably want Girgensons or Asplund to be a part of their shutdown line, which means one of the 2 has to play center. Girgensons has not done it in a while. He's done it a little sparingly over the past couple of years. By the way, they do also have Riley Sheahan. That's a 7th guy. I don't think he'll make the team, but I didn't think he'd make the team. Was it 2 years ago now? 2 years ago for the COVID year, and he did make the team. So outside chance maybe that Riley Sheahan becomes their 4th line center in a checking role and a face-off specialist role. But man, I hope that does not happen, because outside of being a face-off specialist, that guy is not helping this team take a step forward at all. So, who plays center? Tage, Cozens, Krebs, Middlestat, Girgensons, and Asplund. When we come back, the next 3 names on our Sabres money and power list, the most important individuals in the Buffalo Sabres organization, 13 through 15. When we come back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Welcome back, Locked On Sabres. Joe DiBiase here on a Thursday, the Thursday the Sabres open their 2022-23 training camp. We continue on with our Sabres money and power list as we break down the 13 most important and impactful individuals in the Buffalo Sabres organization, and I guess outside the organization too. I did have an agent in there at one point. And starting at number 15 today, as we continue on our list, Kyle Okposo, mentioned earlier in the show, I do believe he's going to be named captain. He is the leader in that locker room. He is a good player. 20 goals for the first time in his Sabres career last season. Ties his career high for the Sabres with 45 points. If you told me Okposo would get 20 goals and 45 points in year 6 of that contract, you probably would have called that contract a success. He has taken over the locker room. He has become a leader in that organization. And I think he is super impactful in the growth of the young players on that team. And also, avoiding another dead weight contract this year, I think will be important. Can Okposo contribute? Because last year, he was relied upon to contribute on the power play and at 5-on-5 and to play a shutdown role. They asked him to do a lot of things, and he showed up. Can he continue to show up on the ice? That will be a major part of their season if Okposo can be, again, a 40-plus point guy playing third line minutes. So Okposo comes in at number 15 on our Sabres Money and Power list. Number 14, Jason Karmanos, Associate General Manager of the Buffalo Sabres, comes in at number 14, kind of the architect of building a analytics department that is impactful in the Sabres organization. Maybe the first man to birth the analytics revolution in the Sabres organization. They have other guys that I think are doing more of the work on that front, but Karmanos, who built the analytics department for the Pittsburgh Penguins, hired by Kevin Adams to do the same, also the GM of the Rochester Americans, so that has its own role. But I think Karmanos comes in at number 14 because he really started the change into a more data-driven way of doing things with the Buffalo Sabres. So Jason Karmanos, Associate General Manager, comes in as the 14th most important individual for the Buffalo Sabres. And number 13 on our list, Dylan Cozens. Dylan Cozens, kind of an interesting spot on the team. He's not relied upon as much for offense. He's not being asked to become an 80, 90 point guy, but I think a lot are asking him to become that number 2 center. And I think Matthew Savoy, Tage Thompson, guys like that will be more relied upon to be the star offensive centerman. But Cozens, the defensive centerman that can put the puck in the back of the net. And I wonder if fans are hoping he becomes a Selke type of player. I mean, that's a high bar to ask when you think about Patrice Bergerons and Mark Stones and players like that. But I think he's being viewed as a guy that should be a reliable two-way player that can play power play, play penalty kill, could be on the ice both when you're down 1 at the end of a game and up 1 at the end of a game. So Dylan Cozens in a very specific type of role as the Drury, if you will, to the next Sabres roster build here. Also being a top 10 pick, and you can't be missing on picks like that. And I know that was the previous GM, but you can't be missing on picks like that. And I think the Sabres really need Dylan Cozens to show up. And by the way, not the previous GM. That was Kevin Adams. So anyways, big role for Cozens, I think, going forward. And he kind of needs to take a step forward offensively. 38 points in 79 games last season. That was a step forward from the year prior. I think if we could get him into the 50-point territory in 22-23, that will really help the Sabres take a big step forward. So Dylan Cozens at number 13, Jason Karmanos at number 14, and Kyle Okposo at number 15. We have a betting preview to come. We have more coverage of Sabres training camp and the Sabres preseason coming your way here on the Locked On Sabres podcast as we will continue to roll into the regular season. And we'll get fired up. We'll have a lot more shows planned coming up in the next couple of days and the next week as we will have a lot more action to talk about here with the Buffalo Sabres. So thanks everybody for listening. At Sneaky Joe Sports to follow me on Twitter, at Locked On Sabres to follow us on our podcast Twitter account. And thanks for making us your first listen every day. Now go make your second listen Locked On NHL. Locked On experts giving you a daily 30-minute podcast on all things NHL all year long. Stay up to date on everything in the hockey world. Locked On NHL, your daily 30-minute podcast. Talk to you next time on here on Locked On Sabres.